Hello, welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. Been watching a lot of Bruce Lee videos lately. Stuff on YouTube, short clips of stuff, analysis of his fights and things from his movies. Big Bruce Lee fan. I bought myself a copy of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do when I was in college. Read it through. I've talked about that ad nauseum in some other videos. One of the first things that my father and I could really agree on when we saw Enter the Dragon for the first time, and we both clicked on how just amazing it was. And some of that philosophy leaks through to how I approach role-playing games, for good or for ill. And that might take a little bit to explain. The philosophy I'm talking about is the concept of fluidity, flexibility, that you don't retain a rigid set of disciplines and doctrines. You be like water. You learn to improvise, to flow in and out of situations. Your enemy expands, you contract. Your enemy contracts, you expand. You put water in a cup, it becomes a cup. Put water in a bowl, it becomes a bowl. Water can flow or water can crash. Be like water. It was a rejection of a lot of the formalized martial art training that was being done at the time, the very rigid sets of katas and techniques, the routines of movements that were meant to provide one with superior physical combat ability, and do in many ways. There's a lot of benefit from the conditioning and the muscle memory that you build up with traditional training. A lot of Jeet Kune Do starts with certain elements of traditional training, but when you can, you break away from the tradition and you start absorbing techniques from many places, not focusing on one style, but gathering a collection of styles and forging your own art, your own style, your own flow. And some of this, when I take it across the boundaries into role-playing games, flows from my having problems with rigid setting structures. I have been in any number of games or been approaching any number of games where I have been told that idea that I had just doesn't work because it is too against canon. And granted, there are places for that in games. You know, there are rules. There are rules for the mechanics of how things happen and how characters can be built, but then there's this other sets of rules. You know, you cannot have if you're playing Aeon Trinity, you can't play an aberrant character. They're all the bad guys now. So what if they were a good guy in the last one? As you have an aberrant character in Aeon Trinity, they're a villain. You can't play that. Play one of the Aeon Trinity characters. All of which suck terribly. I hate that game. And oh my god, don't even step out of line if you're playing anything involved in Warhammer, particularly the role-playing games. They had to go a certain length in the latest Warhammer 40k role-playing game. They had to introduce some elements to make it possible for there to be a little bit more flow, because the rigidity of that setting and its astonishingly huge and beautiful history of lore doesn't allow for a lot of going off the rails or getting out of your lane. And off the rails and out of my lane is kind of my natural habitat. You know, particular D&D settings, or these things that have this long, rich lore and history. About the only thing where I stick close to lore at all is when I'm playing in a Star Trek or Star Wars game. One, because I've been following that lore all along. If I started to try and catch up with 40k at this point in time, I would never do it. There's a decades-long head start, and the people who are familiar with it and who have dedicated themselves to knowing it, oh, that's a very dedicated fan group, and very focused on everything being correct. The factions and the races and the chapters and the individuals, and just no can do. The Star Wars, even if I'm playing in a Star Wars game or running a Star Wars game, I'm going to push the boundaries and step out of it a little bit. There's plenty of history for that in Star Wars, the extended universe or the Legends universe, whatever you want to call it. There's been a lot of additional Star Trek material written off to the side. Some of it's canon, some of it's not. Same as Doctor Who. The property, one, I'm much more science fiction based than fantasy based, and two, I got to improvise. My style has come to grow off of being fluid, flowing through a game, as opposed to referring constantly in my mind back to whether or not something is canon or if it fits with the lore. Does this actually work by every? I'll take things. We're playing a Star Wars game. I'll take things out of recognized space and time and take those rules and those characters and those concepts and put them someplace else where I can play with them a little bit more with some more freedom. Now, outside of the bad guys have a very large thing and the good guys have to blow it up. There's only so many times you can do that, really. Like 3, maybe 4. So I don't exactly reject the rigidity of a setting in a role-playing game. It has its place. It absolutely does. There are people who really enjoy 40K, and more power to them. I love the models. I'd love to play with them. I like to riff on them a little bit. But, I showed a couple of my riffs to friends of mine who were into it. They almost came to blows over it. So, you gotta... I can't deal with that level of rigidity. It's a weakness on my part. Again, it is a rich and astonishing background. It has a set of scope and scale and majesty and terror all at the same time. That is just, it is its own thing. It is unique, and I cannot talk about my appreciation for it enough. I don't want to go there. I don't want to roll dice there. I don't want to spend the money to have the plastic for it. I wouldn't mind creating my own war game. Got the 3D printers in the next room and working on my modeling. I wouldn't mind making my own plastic figures shooting at each other across a grid game, and that sounds like fun. I'd actually do that. So I did some tactical game design for one of the Victory products. Alternate Victory 1 includes a basic tactical combat rule set for Victory. And, the paper miniatures that I put out, you can use those. I wouldn't mind doing something a little bit more involved and a little bit more dedicated. Maybe later. But rest assured, when I do that, it's not going to have a too deep or too rigid of a lore. I like user serviceable parts. I like being able to take the lore that I'm given, say, these elements are very nice, I like them a lot, and I'll use these someplace else that has different things. Maybe I'll mix some stuff. There might be some stuff you don't think belongs here. I'm going to throw that in anyway because I like that and I think it would be fun. I like to riff. To look at it from a musical perspective. There are schools of music, classical music, certain forms of rock that have a rigid structure. Mostly older forms of music. A lot of more modern music involves being able to move around a little bit and not have to rely on that very rigid set of structures. When I play, I like to liken it to jazz, where you start off with about the same idea, but someone riffs and someone follows and suddenly you're jamming and you have a song no one has ever heard before. And it breaks a lot of the rules and creates some new rules as it goes on and you find new patterns. That's how I like to play my role-playing games. And the groups that I'm in, Generally don't have too much of a problem with this. If they're not already there, it's kind of a school of play itself. Yes, there are things that have very set and very rigid settings, and sometimes you delve into those, you dip, you read, you enjoy the material, but when you sit down and you roll dice and you tell the dungeon master what is happening, sometimes you do stuff that's not in the book. Sometimes your character comes from someplace that is from two other books or another game entirely. I had an amazing game master when I was in college, Jay. I will never forget this stuff. If you're watching, it always changed my life. As he ran Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Strangeness and things that I thought up on the way home from school, it was basically using the Palladium rule system. Bold choice to begin with, but he would let you riff stuff from anywhere. He also included, next to TMNT, which was the base rule set, the Palladium rules for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he pulled out a copy of Villains and Vigilantes. Also, bold feckin' choice, because neither of those systems are particularly fluid. But he put them together in such a way, I don't think I could ever replicate it. I kind of know how it went, but you give him a character concept, my character comes from here. My character came from this game system or this setting. And he'd flow with it. He'd make it work. Okay, give me a set of stats. Give me some rolls on this chart. Let's make this work for where you're at. Okay, here we go. And it was amazing. And a lot of things I do in games now, I do because he took all of the limiters off of my concepts of what a role-playing game was. I'd had a lot of good experiences with RPGs at that point in time, but I'd never had one that was free form. I'd never had one that flowed like water. And that is my introduction to RPGs flowing like water. I'd played plenty of Chill. I'd played some Call of Cthulhu. I had played Stormbringer, a few really, really decent games with heavy lore, and those were fun. I was always catching up. I would make the character that would kind of not understand what was going on, so people had to explain it to him, so I always had a perfect good reason for people to be explaining things to me. But then here was this system where anything could happen and you could come from anywhere, and you've got all these characters who have nothing in common with one another thrown into one group, and now, hey, it worked. It flowed, and I didn't have to master any lore. There was a couple of paragraphs of story, but everything else was what had gone on in the history of the game, and I was creating that history from day one as I entered. As a player, I was contributing to how that game flowed, and my story flowed into everyone else's, and it flowed, and it crashed. That is not to say that my style is superior to any other style. I really don't think it is. It is the style that functions for me. I have a lot of respect for the dungeon masters and game masters who have these volumes of lore that they can call on like that. I know it was not easy for them to acquire that knowledge, and they had to work through that and get it stored in there. And that's amazing, and I can't do that. I really appreciate someone who can. Someone who has all that knowledge and all that lore from a given setting, who can bring someone who isn't familiar with that information into the setting and keep them comfortable with it. I've had dungeon masters, game masters who were that good. And I wish I was that good, but I'm not. I create the lore on the fly as I go. I have done this for so long, I can make it seem like there are set Bibles of information that absolutely govern how things operate. And I forget my own lore from time to time and make it up. And, well, here's why there is an exception to that set of rules. Because nothing pisses me off like someone using my lore against me. So I'm happy to be able to change it from time to time. For me, and this is admittedly just for me, gaming should be like Jeet Kune Do. Role-playing games should be a, a free-form, improvisational, growing, living conglomeration of bits and pieces of everything I've ever done in a game. Every game I do from this point forward, every character I play from this point forward can draw from anything I've done in the past, anything I happen to see, information that gets dropped around me, and we are living in an information-rich society where it comes to this stuff right now, where I can just craft in the raw clay of ideas what the experience is going to be for me, for the other players at the table, player or GM. And that's not a style for everyone, granted, and that's perfectly fine. One of the wonderful things about this hobby is that a traditionalist or someone who is setting specific and someone who is completely freeform can all sit at the same table and go around it. And we can each run, we can each play, and we can all enjoy this so long as we respect one another's styles and understand what we can gain from that. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from my game masters. So much. Vic and Mike and Dave and so many people have taught me things in games. And I hope that I have brought some inspiration and some teaching to the games that I have run. It's like watching any kung fu movie or going to a music festival. There's so many different styles, so many different ways to do this one thing, and no one of them is right. And I love that. You can be excellent with almost any style out there. Maybe not the game master is the god of the table and shall demand everything be. Most styles out there are perfectly acceptable, completely compatible, and everyone should get a chance to sample many of them. Play with different people, see how these things go, swap from table to table, see what style suits you, and go with it. Stretch a little bit. Try someone else's style for a little while. See if you can handle it from both sides of the table. Player, game master, sure. Give it a try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And this is system dependent. You can do this kind of free form or that kind of rigid setting with any system out there. The GURPS, D&D, Fudge, it doesn't really matter. You've got all of these choices now. And at the end of the day, it's a game. And you should play. Play and enjoy. And if you're not enjoying, switch it up. Because you sit down at that table, it's your game. You're getting a piece of that story, and you are giving a piece of your story to everyone else. Let it be the fun and creative process that you want it to be. Little philosophical tonight. This is milk, not coffee. I'm about to go to bed. I'm letting some medications kick in because headache and long day, and I get a chance to take tomorrow off from a number of things. And I'm going to record this a night early so that I'm free to spend my day recovering from a long week of working and having a great amount of fun with a friend who is visiting. Lisa, if you're watching, I love you, and I'm looking forward to the next time we get to meet. That being said, enjoy your games and tell me about them. I want to hear about the games that you get into, that you enjoy, the style that you like to use. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. Tell me about your games. Tell me what style you like to use. Tell me what style you like to experience. Or tell me what style you don't like. I mean, that's also good information. Things you'd like to hear me talk about, questions you'd like to ask me, leave me a comment below. I will love getting your comment. You will love leaving me one. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, why not? My channel is awesome. You might want to hit the subscribe button. If you do, hit the notification bell so that you're also alerted when my videos become available. If you'd like to contribute to the channel in a more substantial manner, I invite you to hit me at my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ScottCorum, and consider donating. Anything helps, allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy your play. I'm Scott Corum, this is What Does Matter to Me, and I'll see you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.